Welcome to Worcester Public Library's virtual cooking class, Cooking Myths with Chef Kim. Chef Uxtetter is a graduate of former Girls Trade in Worcester and a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America. After working various restaurants and hotels around the country, she settled back in the area as a chef and raised her family. She began teaching in 2005 and in 2010 joined Worcester Technical High School as a culinary instructor and enjoys teaching students, friends, and family. Chef Kim has been teaching cooking classes for WPL for the past 3 years. The library was recently awarded a grant from the National Network of Libraries of Medicine to expand our cooking and nutrition classes. Today, she will solve some cooking mysteries for us. Have you ever been told you must rinse your pasta when it's done, or add salt to the water it boils faster? These and many other culinary shoulds and shouldn'ts will be discussed as we talk about what really works or doesn't, and more importantly, why.
And mysteries. Dorothy actually brought the topic up to me, and I said, that's great, because there's a lot of things that you hear that you wonder, gee, is that really true? I don't really know. And obviously the internet, you can find anything on. Whether it's actually true or not is an entirely different thing. One of the resources that I used for a few background questions for myself is a book that I absolutely love, and it's called On Food and Cooking by Harold McGee. And it gives you all of the science behind cooking. And I'm kind of a nerd. I love to know why things happen the way they do. So it's a great book to find all of that out. It was little things like we're going to start with our eggs actually first. And I have a pot of water, and I've got my 3 eggs in there. I'm going to be doing some hard-boiled eggs. And the funny thing is even though they're called hard-boiled eggs, you don't ever want to boil them. The main reason being is that as the water agitates, what's going to happen is obviously they're going to bump into each other. The more eggs that you have in the pot, the more they're going to bump off of each other, and you're going to end up with cracked shells. And as you know, with a cracked shell, you're going to have your egg leaking everywhere, or water's going to get in there. So even though they're called boiled eggs, you never actually boil them. What you're going to do is we're going to bring it just to a boil. So my eggs have been put into the pot. They've been covered entirely with cold to warm water. I don't recommend super cold. I would rather do kind of a lukewarm water. That's perfect. You don't want to start it with hot water. I am going to put a little sprinkle of cider vinegar in there. It could be white vinegar. It can be cider vinegar. It's a little expensive, but you can certainly use white wine vinegar. I did maybe a teaspoon. Do not use red vinegar, red wine vinegar. I tell my students this all the time. It will actually permeate the shell of the egg if you put enough in there, and it might change the color of the eggs. The main reason for adding the vinegar is not so much that it's going to do anything to help it cook faster. The vinegar will do 2 things for the eggs. One, if you get a crack, what's going to happen is that the vinegar will cook the protein faster so that your egg will essentially be sealed and the egg white won't continue to seep out of the egg. So it'll basically it'll cook it so that it's done. That's number 1. Number 2, there are some theories that say that the vinegar will help soften the shell a little bit to make them easier to peel. I couldn't find any information that says that that's 100% correct. So, but what it will do is it will help cook your eggs a little bit faster. If you didn't know this, eggshells are very permeable. So even the cartons that they're stored in, they actually say you want to keep them away from everything else in your refrigerator that has a very heavy scent. So if you've got raw onions in your refrigerator, you don't want to put your eggs anywhere near them, because obviously with a thin shell, they're going to absorb all of those scents, and it's going to change the flavor of your egg. So you want to be very careful about that. So the vinegar and the water, in theory, will help to make the protein coagulate a little faster in your egg and cook it a little bit better. A perfect hard-boiled egg is going to have a beautiful yellow yolk that's a little bit moist, not super crumbly. It doesn't have the green tinge around it, hopefully. And your white is going to be nice and soft. It's going to be nice and pliable, but not rubbery. The longer you cook the egg, your white is going to get tougher. It's going to become really rubbery and not creamy. And your yolk is going to go from yellow to kind of a grayish green. And that's just because of the sulfur that's present in the egg yolks. And that's another way that you can tell that your egg has maybe been cooked a little too long. So again, what I've done is I've got my eggs in my water now. I've put a little bit of vinegar in there, and it's starting to almost simmer. A simmer happens at about 165 degrees. So we're going to wait a few more minutes, and this is going to boil. As soon as it boils, we're going to do two things. We're going to cover it with a lid, and we're going to turn the heat off. I'm actually going to also take it off the stove because it's I'm not fortunate enough to have gas at home. If it was a gas burner, I would just turn it off and leave it there. But with these electric stoves, they tend to hold residual heat, and that's going to continue to possibly bring the temperature of the water up. So I'm going to actually move it off the burner as soon as it's done. We're going to wait exactly 12 minutes, and that will give you a perfectly cooked egg every single time, a beautiful hard-boiled egg. When that's done, 12 minutes has passed, we're going to take it off and put it into an ice bath, which is nothing more than a bowl with ice and water. That's going to do two things. A, it's going to cool it rapidly, and it's going to stop the cooking process so that the egg doesn't continue to cook as it sits. So we're going to do that. In the meantime, we're also going to talk about a perfect, my dad wanted to bring this up because I was telling him about this class, and we wanted to talk a little bit about scrambled eggs. There's a lot of myths and mysteries about adding milk or cream or water to your eggs, which is the best to add, which is going to give you a fluffier egg, what's going to make a better scrambled egg. And realistically, it's two things. One, there's a taste preference. We use a little bit of cream at the school, and I mean a little bit. So for each egg, I might even add a teaspoon at best. What it's going to do is, again, the extra moisture with the eggs is going to bind to the protein and help it cook a little bit faster, and it's going to make it a little bit more moist. But it's not really going to make it all that much fluffier. A fluffy egg comes from really, really, really good whipping ahead of time. So just with either a whisk or with a fork, whipping it really well to incorporate a lot of air and to have a beautifully hot but not too hot pan, so that as soon as it goes in, it starts cooking, and the heat is what's going to make your eggs nice and fluffy. That combined with the air you've incorporated into it and stirring it frequently. The main reason my dad wanted me to talk about scrambled eggs is because of his favorite way of making them, and that's in a microwave. Very few people have made scrambled eggs in the microwave. They're super simple, and they come out super fluffy and really nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to do really quick, because we can. We're going to scramble a couple of eggs in the pan, and we're going to scramble a couple eggs in the microwave, and I'm going to put them together on a plate and just see if there's any difference in terms of texture. The ones in the pan, I won't add anything to. The ones in the microwave will have a little bit of egg. So I don't know if you can see my pot here. I don't think that you really can, but the water is just about at a boil. You're starting to get some steam coming up now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the eggs and get them cracked so that we can start thinking about.
We can see the egg. We can see the pot. Yeah.
Oh, good. It's so hard to tell from looking at myself on the screen what you can and can't see, so thank you. All right, so little known fact, supposedly they say that older eggs are going to peel better, and there's a reason for that. So fresh, super fresh eggs are going to fill the entire shell. And what happens as time passes, again, air permeates the shell, there's moisture loss, and there becomes a little bit of an air pocket. So at the top of the shell, already there exists a little air pocket because the shell, the egg doesn't fill entirely the whole shell. There's a little bit of air pocket in there. And what happens is over time, your air pocket gets a little bit larger, your egg shrinks, and what that does is it pulls away from the shell. And so the more that it pulls away from the shell, the easier it is to peel because it didn't stick to the shell as readily when you were cooking it. And there's also a bigger air pocket at the end. In theory, in a perfect world, that's going to be it. These should be my older eggs that I put in the pot because I know I've had them for a couple of weeks. And yes, it's fine to keep eggs for a long time. Most of our eggs are pasteurized these days anyways, and so holding on to them for a long time isn't going to do any harm. And you can tell when an egg starts to get old. I may crack one in a minute and show you that because you can tell the age of an egg just by looking at it. So essentially, we're just about at a boil. I'm going to wait 30 seconds, and it should come to a full rolling boil. And again, the pot you use is also important. You want to make sure that the eggs are thoroughly submerged, and that it's not such a small pot that as soon as it does boil, they start banging into each other. So we're at a boil. I just turned my heat off. I've covered it. I'm going to move it off to the side just a little bit. Whoops. We're going to set a timer for 12 minutes. Okay, so that should be a perfectly hard-cooked egg. In the meantime, we're going to do our quick scrambled eggs here. I'm going to crack it into this bowl. I think you might be able to tell what you're looking for and what you can tell in an egg. I don't know if you can see it as well as I can. I'm going to try and hold this forward a little bit. So no, probably not. There's two things in your egg here. You have your yolk, and then you have the albumin, and it should be in two stages. A beautiful fresh egg is going to have the middle of it, so the white that's surrounding the yolk is going to be really tall and very defined as opposed to the rest of the egg. Give me 1 second. I figured if I can't show you, I can draw you a picture. So essentially, if you're looking at this, your yolk is going to be here. And then you should have a very beautiful high area that's all white. That's going to be your beautiful albumin, and then a little more of the thinner white around the edge. And that's how you can tell your egg is really, really fresh. What happens as your egg ages, this gets smaller and flatter, and pretty soon it all just blends into one. So if you crack an egg and you don't see a beautifully raised white portion, you know your egg's a little bit older. It's not going to change anything. It's just knowing the age of your eggs. So I have the 2 eggs here. And I'm going to get these going and get these whipped up really well with just a lot of air. And then we're going to start the ones in the microwave in just a minute. So again, I'm just whipping it really, really well. Get as much air in here as I can. Now, in my book, they recommend starting with a kind of a cold pan to scramble your eggs, and that your eggs are going to end up tough if they go into a hot pan. I disagree with that. When we make them at school, we use a combination of bacon fat and butter. The main reason being is that bacon fat can come to a higher temperature. It doesn't burn as quickly as butter does. And you want a beautiful, beautiful hot pan when you go to cook your scrambled eggs, because what happens then is as soon as they hit the pan, they're going to start to coagulate and start to form on the bottom. And then as you slowly pull those forward and mix that in, you're going to get your really beautiful eggs that are scrambled and yet not overdone. Two things you don't want to do. The longer you scramble them and the harder you scramble them, you're going to cook the moisture out. And the more you cook the moisture out, you're going to make your eggs very tough. The other thing that you're going to do is you're going to run the risk of browning them. Some people don't mind browned eggs. Any good restaurant, good breakfast place that gives you breakfast, your eggs are never going to be brown. In a perfect world, they should not be. They should be a beautiful golden color and nice and light and fluffy. So my butter is almost melted. We're going to let this get really, really hot to the point of it starting to sizzle, and then we're going to get the eggs in there. A little pinch of salt and pepper. For those of you that follow my classes know that I love to make my own little salt and pepper blend that I keep in a container because it's the easiest way to season anything. And I like to have that around. So my butter is just about at the right point. I can hear it sizzling a little bit. And we're going to pour that in and get our spatula going on it right away. So as we pour that in, you don't need to move it initially. You want to wait until you can start seeing a little bit about the edges, or it's going to start to boil. And then you just want to keep moving your eggs. The other thing you want to do is you always, always, always want to undercook them. Leave them a little bit soft because they're going to carry over cook. And that's how you're going to get a really, really, really nice moist egg. If you cook this too long, what's going to happen is that it's going to dry out. And that's when you really get that brown, hard looking egg. So these are just about finished. A little salt and pepper in here. And okay, so that is an egg with nothing in it other than, I lost my plate, other than some, just a nice whipped egg. All right, we have that there. I'm going to put my water on, or get my water over to the stove for the pasta so that we're not waiting too long for it. And now we're going to do the microwave. So I've got my glass measuring cup, about a half a tablespoon of butter. We're going to pop that in the microwave.
Chef Kim, we have a question.
Sure.
Philomena wants to know why bacon fat?
Because it goes to it goes to a higher, it can go to a higher temperature without burning and smoking. That's mainly the main reason. And usually when we serve it, we're serving bacon and eggs for breakfast, and so it kind of complements the flavor. You could use a little bit of canola oil if you don't want to use bacon fat, and that's perfectly fine. The big thing is your butter will brown before it actually gets hot enough to have a nice hot pan. So if I was doing an omelet, I would maybe do a little bit of canola oil with my butter. I hope that helps.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
So I have my butter and it's melted in my measuring cup. I probably could have used a little bit more.
One more question.
Sure.
So, Sarah says she wants to know, is that a normal thing for restaurants to use bacon fat?
Probably not.
She says, I hope not. I really hope not.
I know, because people would be very surprised to learn that, especially if they don't eat pork.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of places do. They usually use what's called a clarified butter, or ghee, and that's butter that the milk solids have been removed from, so that can go to a higher temperature as well. And if they use that, you're fine. In fact, that's a funny comment, because the gentleman I used to work with always wanted to put bacon fat in the eggs every time he did them. And I said, you got to stop that. What if people don't eat bacon? You know, you can't. So I talked him out of doing it. So we don't do that anymore, because it bothered me. But that was, you know, so what I added there was a little bit of milk. I probably have about 2 tablespoons of milk here. You can add more or less. I'm going to pop this in the microwave for 1 minute. The idea is that you want to use a big enough glass measuring container or bowl because obviously it's going to expand. So what happens is that you're creating steam. And if you make something with an egg, like a cream puff or something, your natural leavening is from the steam. So being cooked in the microwave like that, it cooks from the outside in, and the extra moisture is going to create steam, which is going to make this really big, fluffy egg. And that's the main reason why they come out so nice in the microwave, is that the steam cooks it faster, and the egg doesn't really have a chance to get overdone. So they're going to be super light and fluffy. That's at about 20 seconds. We're going to take it out. We're going to stir it one more time, pop it back in the microwave, and we'll be done. And we'll show you what it looks like. While I'm waiting on that, actually, I might pull that out right now. Okay, so you've got a little bit of a good look at that. There's still some moisture in there. All right, so I'm going to mix it up a little bit because you can still see there's quite a bit of water in here. But you saw the volume. It really, really rose in here. We're going to give it the last. We're only going to cook it for about another 20 seconds, and that should be done. And we'll put them on the plate here so that we can have a little side-by-side comparison. Our eggs are almost done. And then those are going to go into our baked stuffed potato salad in a little bit, which we'll come back to. We're going to go to the pasta next because it's going to take a little bit of time for the pasta to cook, and I'm going to walk you through the process of getting that done. Okay, so the eggs came out, and you can see that they've really changed in size in here, and we're just going to look at the difference in that. I mean, yes, obviously you've got some steam in there, so you've got your volume or whatnot, which is going to give you that look to it. I get apart with a fork. But you can see how beautiful and how light it is. The lightness comes from the addition of the milk and or cream, but it makes a beautiful product, all done, one pan, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and it's a really, really nice product. So you can really tell the difference between the two. Pretty amazing. This is my dad's favorite way to cook eggs. So he told me I had to show everybody because nobody knows about it. So here we go. Do we have any questions? Anything I can answer for anybody? We good? Good.
Sorry, there's a question did come in. I'm sorry. Philomena wants to know, do you have an opinion on egg beaters in cooking, taste, downside of using them?
I love egg beaters just because it's nutritionally speaking, there's nothing wrong with an egg. The egg beaters, I think, tends to have, I think they've got great flavor. I think they're easy to cook with. They're less temperamental, I think, in terms of like if you're scrambling or doing something with them because of the way that they're produced, which I don't 100% know exactly how they're produced, but I like them. I think that they're great to cook with. I think they make a nice omelet. I have not baked with them. I don't see why you couldn't. If it's egg for egg, you should be able to. But that's not something I've done just because we typically tend to cook with eggs.
Okay, thank you. She also wants to know what's the total time to microwave the eggs?
Total time, I'm going to say, so I put it in for a minute at first, but I pulled it out with a little bit of time left. I'm going to give it a minute to about a minute and a half. Okay, and our timer just went off, so our eggs should be done. I'm going to take them out and put them in a bowl of ice water. I also have another fun trick to show you. So I have my ice water here. Well, it had ice when I began, but it's a little bit warm here, so there's no more ice. Excuse me for stepping out of the way. I want to show you an easy way. Now, sometimes I work with some people that like to joke around in school, and they like to take, guess which one is the cooked egg, which one is the raw egg. I can tell you an easy way to find out. A raw egg will not spin, all right? It just falls onto its side because of the natural weight. Once your egg is hard-boiled, ideally your yolk is centered in the egg, and so this should spin like a top. I just want to keep it from falling. Keep it from falling off my cutting board. And it'll spin like a top, straight up and down, and then you know that your egg is cooked. So we're going to move this off to the side, and I guess I better talk a little faster because we're not going to get our pasta salad inside. Okay, pasta. Couple big things about pasta is, first and foremost, you want to make sure that whatever pasta you're cooking, you're going to use about 3 times as much water as you have pasta. Otherwise, there's just no way that it's going to come out good. What's going to happen is that you're going to build up so much starch in the water that your pasta gets gummy, and it really, all of that starch adheres to it. Essentially what happens, you start with your little pieces of pasta, and what they do is they're going to absorb the water, and the water is going to make the pasta swell, and in the process is going to give off starch. And so you need somewhere for that starch to go in the water, and there needs to be plenty of it so that it doesn't stick back to the pasta. You want some starch on your pasta so that when you're adding your sauce, that's going to help your sauce stick to your pasta. So that's good, but you just don't want it to be so much that it becomes gummy. So again, at least 3 times the amount of water as you have pasta. And I put a cover on it because it will help it boil faster. Oh, I put my salt away. But I am going to add salt to my water. And the main reason, and as you see, I'm putting in quite a bit. It can taste like the ocean. That's perfectly fine. The main reason for adding the salt is not to make the water boil faster. Because, reasonably speaking, if I added enough salt to make this boil faster, I would add so much salt that we would never be able to eat the pasta. It would be way too salty. This is not going to make it boil any faster, maybe 5 to 10 seconds, but really nothing discernible. The main reason for adding salt is flavor. If you salt your pasta now while it's cooking, it's going to, again, it's permeable. It's going to soak that salt in. It's going to be present in the flavor. I do the same thing when I cook my vegetables. If I'm blanching vegetables or boiling them, I add a little bit of salt because it picks up that salt while it's cooking. So I'm gonna move a little bit quicker now, I think, because we definitely wanted to have a little time for Q&A, and I spent so much time on eggs that I'm falling behind on our pasta salad here. I'm going to show you 2 things. I grabbed my zucchini to start with, and I'm going to show you my pepper. So the antipasto salad has roasted pepper, grilled zucchini and yellow squash, and grilled asparagus, roasted garlic. Most of this can be done on your outdoor grill. I have an indoor little grill as well that I'm going to cook the vegetables on really quickly. But if you don't want to do your pepper on the grill, I think I've talked about this before, you can do it right in your oven. And I'm going to cut my pepper in half. I'm going to leave the seeds intact. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to roast my garlic at the same time as I'm doing my pepper. I've done this before. It works really, really good. You can do one of 2 things. You can make a little pouch. I have a little pouch here with my garlic. It's all been peeled. I cut it into smaller pieces so that it will roast faster. And I'm going to add olive oil to that. And I'm going to seal that up. And I'm literally going to do that at the same time as my peppers. The other way that I've done it is I've just taken the garlic cloves and just tucked them right under the half of the pepper and put a little extra olive oil in there and popped them in the oven. Same thing will work. The pepper is going to provide a little moisture and a little cover for it so it doesn't burn, but it's going to get it nice and roasted. I'm going to spray these with a little bit of cooking spray and pop them in the oven, and they're going to roast. They should probably take 15 minutes, and that way we can peel the skin off. So while we're doing that, I'm going to show you real quick how to prep my vegetables. I've taken the top and bottom off of my yellow squash. I said to cut everything into planks. What I mean is the easiest way to do that if you have something small is to stand this up and cut straight down. And that's going to give you long, skinny planks. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can certainly do the same thing on the side. It's going to take a little bit of practice to get you good at it. You can do rounds. It doesn't make any bit of difference. I have a very hot grill on, and I'm going to pop these on and just get some beautiful grill marks on them. And the idea is just to cook it a little bit more. I like the flavor of a grilled squash, which is going to add, it just adds a little extra something. So with my zucchini here, I am going to cut it in half. That way I can stand it up. I'll show you either way. And if you want, you could cut the bottom off like I just did and then flip it onto the flat side. That way you've got something flat. It's much easier to work with, and so then you can just cut straight up and down to get your planks, and it's safer because it's squared off. The little end pieces are a little bit tougher to grill. They don't grill up as nicely just because of the skin, but we're going to use them anyways because the flavor is fantastic. So we're going to get this ready to go. I suppose you could even cut it in half if you wanted to and continue cutting planks with it. So I'm going to check my squash. So again, I'm just getting some nice grill marks on here so that it's charred. It's a little bit cooked. It's not cooked all the way, just to give it some flavor. I'm going to pop my zucchini on there as well. And again, if we were doing this on a barbecue, medium to high heat, get it nice and hot, and it shouldn't take a few minutes to just grill either side. And then we'll transfer them to a plate. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of salt and pepper to them after they come off the plate. So we have the zucchini, the yellow squash, and the asparagus. We'll put the asparagus on in a minute. I'm sure everybody, I'm guessing that most people would know how to figure out where to cut your asparagus, because obviously the end of it gets very woody and very tough. And the real easy way to do it is you're going to bend it, and as soon as you see it bend, that's where you could probably get away with a little bit more underneath it, but it tends to get very woody at the bottom and very fibrous. So the best way to do it is just to kind of figure out where it bends easily, and then you know that that's where you're going to cut it. You can save the stalks, certainly, if you choose to. They can be cooked down and make a great cream of asparagus soup. Although I have to be honest, you'd need a lot of stalks. It would take quite a while. I'll get my other plate here so that I can show you my squash. So I've just got a nice little char on the squash, and looks pretty. I'm going to pull these off, and we're going to let them sit. And we're going to, now normally I would do a pretty little pattern on it both ways so that we have beautiful diamonds on it. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to get them nice and charred so that it doesn't take quite so long. Because I really want to show you, I talked about coring and quartering a tomato, which isn't all that difficult, but sometimes I like to show different things just because it makes sense to me when I say it, but it might not make sense to everyone else. So we're going to do that. We have these beautiful Roma tomatoes. Roma tomatoes are much better for cooking, not quite so much for eating, but the flavor is great. They have less seeds. They're beautiful, especially this time of year, and the flavor is very concentrated. So what we're going to do, it's a good thing I can multitask, is I'm going to flip my zucchini. We're still waiting for our pasta water to boil. The lid will help it boil faster, so we're kind of waiting on that. and it's almost close. So with my tomato, you have your stem at the end. What we're going to do is I'm just going to cut it right in half, straight top to bottom, and then I'm going to cut it in half again, and that gives me quarters. So I've quartered it. Now to core it, the easiest way to do this, I hold the end that the core was at. I'm going to take my knife very carefully, and I'm going to slide it along, and that's just going to cut out just the seeds, but leave me just a beautiful tomato underneath. No other reason than the seeds. There's a lot of people who don't like seeds in things, and this is just going to make it so that they don't have them in there. Certainly, you can do the same with a regular tomato, a beefsteak tomato or something like that. If you don't love the seeds, you can use the same process to get those cut out, and it's going to taste the same. In fact, right now, the heirloom tomatoes are out, and they're beautiful in the stores, and so a beautiful heirloom tomato would be phenomenal in this with the great flavor that it has. You could also use a grape tomato. There's nothing wrong with that. I just happen to like aroma tomato. I find them easier to work with, and I don't have to cut them in half, because if I was using my grape tomatoes, I'd cut them all in half. That way, if somebody doesn't want it, they're not stuck with a whole tomato. So almost done with this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these into slices. And I'm going to dice them. So that's what we're getting ready to do. So we have our zucchini, yellow squash, our tomatoes. And I'm going to line them up, get them chopped. These are going to go into my bowl for my pasta salad. And I love these flexible cutting boards if you have them, because they're just fantastic that you can just pick them up and dump whatever you're working with right into it, so it doesn't have to move around too much. And my water is almost at a boil, and as soon as it is, we're going to get our pasta in there. The most important thing when cooking pasta is probably the first 30 seconds. As soon as you get that pasta in there, you've got to stir it. If you don't, what happens is they stick together, and the little bit of water that they absorb, it creates this little bit of friction on the surface, and then they're going to go and stick right to each other, and no amount of stirring is really going to be able to pull that apart, because they just fuse together. So as soon as your pasta goes in, you absolutely want to make sure that you are stirring it, and that will help so that you don't have pasta that's all clumped together. We're going to get our asparagus done in a minute here. Got some hot spots on the grill. So hot spots. Now, with my asparagus, I just put it right on the grill and I roll it around a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to give it a chance to char in different spots so that it's a little bit cooked but not overcooked. And that's the way I love my asparagus. And then we're going to end up cutting that up a little bit. So we have our tomatoes. Our pepper is roasting. I'm going to take a quick peek at it so that we can see what it looks like. And it's not ready yet. So our tomatoes, I'll do this really quick. I guess I should have turned the water on a little bit faster for the pasta. We'll get it done still. My zucchini and my yellow squash. We're going to sprinkle this with a little salt and pepper. And especially when it's warm, it's going to suck that all right in, and it's going to give it a little bit more flavor. So it's really good to do it as soon as it comes off. I'm going to try turning this around, see if I can make it boil faster. My lid wasn't fitting quite tight enough, so maybe this will get it to boil a little bit faster. I can't tell you the number of people that think that the minute the water has bubbles in it, it's ready to boil and they can put the pasta in. And that's so wrong, because you're really not at a rolling boil. You really want that full rolling boil to be able to get your pasta going. Again, otherwise it's not hot enough and your water, it will stall the cooking. And once you stall that cooking, you're going to get a lot more gumminess to your pasta. I'm going to talk about it now while we're in the process. Should I or should I not rinse my pasta? If you're making pasta salad like we are, you absolutely want to rinse it. As soon as it's done cooking, you're going to take it right out of here, have your colander ready to go in your sink so that you can drain it when it's at the perfect moment of being done, and then we're going to rinse it in very, very cold water. And the reason being is that that's going to stop the cooking process. It's going to wash off all the added starch that's on the outside of the pasta. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. And what that's going to do is it's going to stop the cooking so that you get a beautiful al dente piece of pasta. It's got a little bit of bite to it, but it's not gummy, it's not chewy, it's not mushy. You don't want any of those things. And then you can use that to make your pasta salad. The big thing, the reason that we rinse it and we rinse off that starch is you want to have the other subtle flavors that you're putting with it to permeate it. So if you leave the starch on there, it's going to get a little gummy, A, and number two, you wouldn't be able to rinse it. You want those flavors to kind of suck into the pasta, which is what will happen. When you make a pasta salad, always have to re-season it about 12 to 24 hours later. If you're serving it the next day, what happens is that the pasta, obviously it's porous, it's going to suck that moisture in, and it kind of sucks that flavor in, and it almost deadens it. So you always want to re-season and re-taste your pasta salad the day after you've made it if you're serving it the next day, and make sure that the flavor is good. My asparagus is just about done. My water is at a full boil now. So my lid wasn't tight enough and I wasn't getting a good boil, which is why, again, you want to have a nice tight-fitting lid. It will bring your water to a boil faster. Pasta. I'm going to add about a half a pound here. Got my spoon right at the ready. I'm going to pour it right in. Oh, I know, one thing I didn't talk about. Should I add oil to the water? A lot of people say, oh, I'm going to add oil to the water. There's two things it's going to do. So I stirred it really quick. We're going to let that come back to a boil, but I'm going to keep stirring this frequently. This should take maybe 6 to 8 minutes to cook. Adding oil to your water while you're cooking is really, it's not going to do anything to the pasta. It's going to put a little oil on it. It's going to coat the pasta. Let me turn this off here. It's going to coat the pasta, but it's not going to do anything to add the flavor. It's not going to make the water boil any faster. It's not going to keep it from sticking. It's essentially not going to do any of those things. Initially, it might help it to not stick because it's going to, all the pasta is going to go right through the oil slick as it goes in. So it's going to be coated a little bit, so it'll help it stick less. But really, if you just, as soon as you get it in there, get it stirred, then you're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about that. So I have my beautiful vegetables here that are all grilled.
I do have another question about salting the vegetables while you're grilling them.
Yep.
Is there a reason that you don't salt it while you're grilling them?
With the zucchini in particular, your zucchini and your yellow squash, if you do it ahead of time, it tends to kind of, it absorbs the moisture and it can get a little wet sometimes, is really the main reason that I don't. It kind of sucks that in. It'll start to weep a little bit when it's sitting before you grill it. You could do it right before you grill it. I mean, literally season it a little bit and then put it on the grill. That's fine too. My personal feeling is that it soaks up the flavor because it's warm and it's already moist on the outside. It sticks a little bit better when it's a little bit warmer. I think you get better flavor. But that's my opinion. There's no science behind that.
Thank you, because I always salted and peppered it while it was cooking.
Yep. So. And I think you can, but as I say, if it sits for any amount of time, if we had time, I'd show you an experiment. I have done that quite a bit. I give a little salt and pepper and maybe a little bit of oil because I know I'm going to grill it, and it gets kind of mushy. It gets discolored when I do that, and so I stopped doing it, and I find that this gives me a little bit cleaner end result.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So my water is boiling now here, and I'm going to keep stirring this a little bit to make sure that they don't stick together. And I've probably even gone a little overkill with the amount of water that's in my pasta. And I'm sorry, the amount of water that's in my pot to the amount of pasta I have. But essentially, it's not a bad thing to have more. You can have up to 5 times the amount of water. The real key is how long is it going to take to boil? If you're in a rush, you could use less water, but you run the risk, if you do, of having so much starch released in the water that you end up with a very starchy pasta. And if you're using it hot, that's going to not be great. You can rinse the starch off if you're doing pasta salad, not a big deal. I have, well, I don't want to get confusing. I was going to say I have rinsed hot pasta before, but that's only because it's going to sit on a buffet for a long time. And so I rinse it and I add a little bit of oil. And what that does is it helps it to keep from getting dried out. The longer it sits, again, as with anything, if you've let your pasta sit for a while, it's going to absorb that moisture. It's naturally what it does. That's why pasta goes so well with sauce. But you know full well if you let that plate sit for a while, it's going to kind of go and suck it all in. So that would be the only time I would rinse hot pasta, is if I'm doing it maybe to sit on a hot buffet where it's going to have a little time to hang out. I have my beautiful tomatoes in here, my zucchini, my yellow squash. We're going to chop up the asparagus. 320. Okay, I'm going to show you peeling the eggs, and we'll put together the potato salad really quick because I really do want to be able to get to any questions and our do's and don'ts. And we all know I seem to have a habit of talking endlessly, and then we have a hard time getting through the whole demo because I'm too busy talking about all kinds of different things. I like to, and I don't know if you noticed, I cut my stem in half. No other reason than I like to get littler pieces when I'm making my pasta salad. I look at the size of my pasta, and I try and have my vegetables roughly the same size, because then they're all going to sit on a fork beautifully, and when you go to eat it versus having a really, really big piece of asparagus and a really, really little piece of pasta, you're going to get more asparagus than you do pasta, which would be okay with me. I love asparagus, but not everybody is going to enjoy that when you've got your salad. So I have beautiful colors here. I've got my tomato, my asparagus, zucchini, yellow squash. I have beautiful fresh mozzarella that I cut, and that's going to go in there as well. I forgot to buy basil at the store today, so I don't have my basil to add to it. And mine is not quite ready in my garden yet to go and pick a little bit, so we're going to do it without the basil. If I was doing my basil, what I would do, I will show you real quick. I'll grab a little bit of spinach so I can show you the technique. I think many of you may have seen me do a what we call a chiffonade, and it's a fancy term for really, really finely cut either herbs or cabbage. I'm trying to, I don't know if we can see it here. When you have perfectly al dente pasta, al dente meaning dente in Italian, to the tooth, what you want is when you cut or break your pasta open, there'll be a ring right on the inside of very, very light white, so it's not fully cooked, and that means it's perfect because it's going to have a little bit of a bite to it. Your water hasn't kind of sucked all the way into the middle yet, so you have a little bit of area where the water hasn't fully made its way in, and it makes it a little bit tough still, or hard, al dente, and that means your pasta is cooked perfectly. So you want it to be a little underdone, and it's just about there, a little bit of a bite to it. Obviously, unless you like your pasta cooked more, and that's perfectly fine. That's anybody's prerogative. But it's going to continue to cook a little bit. If I was serving this hot, I would pull it off absolutely right now because it's going to sit. and it's going to continue to carry over cook, especially if you add a hot sauce to it. This is just about perfect for our pasta salad. We'll drain it, and we're going to rinse it right away with cold water. And then when we're done, what we're going to do is we're going to drizzle it with a little bit of oil, just enough to coat it. You don't want it to be a big oil slick, but just enough to coat it so it doesn't stick together as it sits again. Because again, it's still going to be a little starchy, even though we've already rinsed it. It's just the nature of pasta to want to go and stick to each other. So if you add a little bit of oil, it's going to work much better. We're going to do that real quick. And while that's rinsing, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about finishing up our potato salad and peeling our eggs. I'm going to let that go for a few minutes because it's still a little bit on the warm side. Our potatoes, I cooked them ahead of time, and I don't know how well you can see them, but they've got a little bit of white on the edges, and this is a russet potato, and a russet potato they make a great baked potato because they're flaky on the inside and they're dry. They don't produce as much starch as a waxy potato, like a white potato or even a red bliss potato. And this is where, again, you want that starch. So when I cook my potatoes, and it says it in my potato salad recipe, I cook these to the point where they were just about done, not cooked all the way, and then I dumped them into this pan and I let them dry naturally. And if this was anything but a russet, there would be a little bit more gumminess to it, like, again, a natural starch. When you cook potatoes, if you're going to make mashed potatoes, you see the starch in the water. It colors it. And that starch is the same thing that's going to help your potato salad be creamy, which is why I don't rinse my potatoes. A lot of people will, to stop the cooking process and to kind of rinse that off, but it actually makes a creamier potato because it helps everything stick to it a little bit more. So, but again, there's that little bit of a white flakiness to it because of the russet potato, because it tends to be a little drier and not quite as creamy as if I had used a different potato. So in the recipe, you can certainly sub a red bliss potato, a white boiling potato. Sweet potatoes are a great addition. They add just a little bit of extra flavor to it. Oh, phenomenal. Okay, I'm going to peel my egg real quick. We'll get our pasta tossed with some oil. Okay, so I have my pasta here. I'm going to put it right in my bowl with all my other ingredients. And I am going to drizzle a little olive oil right on top of it now and mix it. Not really going to make my dressing yet per se, but this will at least give it a chance. And I'm only going to use maybe a capful or so, just a real little bit. You can use canola oil. You don't have to use olive oil. But since it's going in my recipe, I just figured we'd use what's already in there. I'm actually going to mix the whole thing right now. And so the roasted red pepper and the garlic would go in here as well. And then I use a white balsamic vinegar. You can use red wine vinegar, cider vinegar, whatever flavor you want to do. The main reason I don't use a regular balsamic is because it's going to discolor my cheese. It's going to turn it, it's not going to be beautiful. So the white balsamic is the beautiful flavor of the balsamic, but it won't discolor my cheese, and it won't make my pasta look such a weird color. I want the beauty of the salad itself to shine through, which is why I would leave it just like that with my white balsamic. And again, I found this just at the grocery store. Their specialty stores have lots of beautiful vinegars. I've used a peach vinegar in here before, a summer white peach. I've used a a raspberry vinegar in there, a little bit. I don't like that one as much, but anything that's a white vinegar is going to go really, really well in there, so that it won't change the color. Okay, we have about 5 more minutes. Sorry, Dorothy, I'm going over today.
That's okay.
And in theory, I should be able to peel it really, really well. Oh, I'll show you one more little secret tip. Spoon. Once you get your egg started, you can dip your spoon in a little bit of water, slide it right underneath the shell, and in theory, you should be able to just run that around, and the whole shell will just pop right out really, really simply. So these were my older eggs because they tend to peel a little bit easier. And always rinse it after you're done. That way you can make sure you don't end up with shells in there. And I'm going to show you the most fun you can have with eggs and a pair of gloves. Easiest way to make egg salad. Super simple way to make guacamole as well. I'm going to show you that. With my potato salad, I also add, in the recipe, I add a little bit of vinegar to that as well. And I've talked in the past, if your recipe is missing something, an acid is usually what it's missing because it helps brighten the flavors. So that's the main reason I use vinegar on my potato salad, is just because it adds that little extra something without dumping in additional salt or anything like that. This is my cooling rack for when I make cookies. This is phenomenal for egg salad. Those little contraptions are so difficult to use. I don't even own one anymore because I discovered this, and this is so much more fun. Number one. Number two, it's easier than getting your hands dirty trying to cut them. Take your egg and just push straight down, and it makes a perfect diced egg. And this is great for, as I say, guacamole. If you cut your avocado in half, just push it right down with the whole shell, and then, it's the quickest and easiest way to make guacamole because then it's all chopped up and you don't even get your hands dirty. Now, I'm struggling with this egg a little bit more. I'm guessing I had a couple of fresh eggs in there. I'm guessing this one was a little bit fresher. So these are going to get added to my, and we have a beautiful hard-cooked egg here, as I can show everybody that the yolk is perfectly cooked. There's no green. It's nice and white. It's firm, but it's not rubbery. And then that mixed with my potatoes. Scallions, which are chopped. Bacon, so I cooked my bacon ahead of time. I diced it up, and then I cooked it in a pan. I like to dice my bacon first. I think it's easier than trying to cook it to cut it after it's already been cooked. My cheddar cheese. Sour cream is the key here. I'm going to use more sour cream than you are mayonnaise. And I said about 1/4 cup. So for right now, we're going to eyeball it. It's about 1/4 cup. You can always add a little bit more. Some people like a real creamy potato salad. Other people like it a little bit drier. Again, that's personal preference. One thing I tell the kids, you can always add more, but you can't take it out. Once it's in there, it's in there. So we're going to go a little careful with how much we add because we can always add more. And we're going to go ahead and just mix this now. Oh, I forgot my vinegar. I think I said about 1 tablespoon of vinegar, which may be a little bit much. So I'm going to start with just a little bit. And that's going to give me a little bit of brightness in here to the flavor. And I'm going to mix this up. And it's going to be, my husband loves this. I mean, you've got bacon, you've got cheese, you've got eggs and potatoes. I don't know what more you could ask for. And it's going to be a lovely baked potato salad, baked stuffed potato salad. Okay, I didn't quite get to finish our pasta salad, but it's very simply adding a mix of some oil and vinegar, as I said, and seasoning it. and then chopping up my red pepper after and adding that as well. The roasted garlic just gives it a little extra flavor. I would recommend using the oil that you cook the garlic in, if you can, because that's going to give it even more flavor. And you got this beautiful roasted garlic flavor in your salad.
We do have a question. They want to know how to make the salt and pepper blend.
Okay, so I take a container, and I've got just a little storage container like this, and I'm going to fill it here. Let me take off my gloves so I can show you. And I'm so sorry we didn't make it for more questions on my do's and don'ts, but if people have 5 minutes, maybe we can, Dorothy. I don't know if your Zoom is going to end.
I don't think so. I can stay if people have questions. Yeah.
So I would fill this about half to 3/4 the way with salt, and then I'm going to add not even a quarter of the amount of pepper. So it's mostly salt, and then a little bit of pepper on top, and then I just stir it in. So I would say probably 3/4 salt and a couple of tablespoons of pepper, and that's going to give me a nice. So it should look it's a little black and white. You don't want, again, personal preference. I'm not huge on pepper. I like pepper, but I think it also can overpower things, so I go a little bit less. If it was up to my husband, there'd be plenty more pepper in here. That helps. And I've got my beautiful potato salad here. I think I've got really a great amount, and it's creamy without being clumped. If that makes any sense, it's not starchy, so it's got a creaminess to it. It's horrible. You wouldn't want to try it anyways. I'm joking. I'm going to eat the whole pot right now. Oh, excuse me. So there were some do's and don'ts that I put together along with the recipes for the class today. And I think we covered a lot of them on the eggs. Do put them in a pot with water and bring them to a boil, hard cook. Do try and use older eggs. If you're poaching an egg, you do want vinegar in the water as well. So, and again, you want to keep your water below a boil. When you crack your egg into the water, the vinegar will help speed the cooking process. I don't know if people like to poach eggs a lot. We're actually having them tomorrow. Oh yeah, and I say don't be skimpy with the butter or oil to cook the scrambled eggs. They say to use a little bit. I like a little bit more. It's just going to add flavor to it. Your pasta, do cook it in at least 3 times the amount of water. Do salt the water. Do rinse the pasta if you're going to make pasta salad and lightly oil it. Don't rinse it if you're serving it hot. Do retaste and reseason. I didn't talk about this. You can use some of your pasta water to add to your sauce, and it's already got the starchiness in it, so it will help the sauce cling even more because it's got the natural starch of the pasta, and there's a little flavor in there. So you can use a little bit of that. A lot of recipes will tell you to save some pasta water and add it to your sauce, and that's the main reason why. Do stir it frequently. Oh, here's the one that cracks me up. People tell you, throw it against the wall to tell if it's done. It'll stick, sure, when it's done, but it's going to be overdone. Pasta that is al dente, which is perfect, is not going to stick to a wall. So by the time you get it to stick to a wall, if you're throwing it, it's going to be mush. Here's the things that we didn't talk about. My sister actually asked me this. She said, can I eat pork if it's pink? You absolutely can. Pork no longer needs to be cooked to the point of being dead and dry. Because it really, they've bred out the possibility of trichinosis is what made people sick when pork was first introduced a really, really, really long time ago. That's been bred out of the pigs, so it doesn't matter. You can cook it medium rare. You have to cook it to 145. That's the magic number. If you've got a thermometer, I always tell people invest in one. It certainly doesn't hurt. Because if it's at 145, as long as it's pink, as long as it's 145, you can eat it. That's the guidelines. I say put potatoes in salted water when they're peeled. It'll help to keep them from browning. it takes a really long time for them to brown, but I do that when I'm making mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving time. I cut them up the day before. I put them in a pot of cold water with some salt. I put them out on the back deck as long as it's cold enough, and the next day you can just bring them back in and cook them. As they sit, they tend to oxidize, and the water will turn brown, and they will turn brown. But if you salt the water, it doesn't happen. Same idea with apples, but you use lemon juice. You use lemon juice or orange juice. Here's the super secret. You can use Sprite. I don't like using Sprite, but you can certainly use Sprite. And what it does is, again, it'll keep your apples from turning brown. And the longer that they sit, eventually they will turn brown and they will break down. But if you need to peel them and it's a little bit before you're going to use them, water and lemon juice. Do check the temperature of your chicken when you cook it. Just because it's not pink does not mean it's cooked all the way. Again, a thermometer, chicken needs to be a minimum of 165, and that should be in the thickest part of the breast if you're cooking just a breast. If you're cooking a whole chicken, check it in the thigh. Dark meat has more fat, and it's denser, and it takes longer to cook. So if your thighs are done, your breast is definitely done. But you always check the thickest part of the thigh if you're cooking a roasted chicken. And make sure you don't get too close to the bone, because the bone is going to radiate heat, and you're going to think it's done, but it won't be. If you're worried about cooking with alcohol, I found this out the hard way. Not all the alcohol cooks off. Some of it will remain, about 40% of it. It's not enough to make anybody tipsy, but if somebody has an inability to have alcohol, then you certainly don't want to. The only way it's going to cook off entirely is if it's done with something in the oven, and it's going to take probably a couple good hours to do it. What else? Oh, adding lemon or lime juice to your avocado will help it brown less, because again, it helps it to keep from oxidizing. It's not going to stop it. The only thing that will stop it would maybe be adding a little light cream or sour cream. If you're making like a guacamole, you could add a little bit of that, or if you're making a sauce, the fat will help coat the fat in the avocado, which will help it to oxidize less. No matter what, eventually it's going to brown, but it's going to take it a lot longer. And the other thing you can do is add ascorbic acid, which you can find at a beer making store. It's a preservative, and it'll help to brown less. It's not going to hurt you, all right, because they use it in cheese making and things like that. It's a perfectly natural product.
What about, what about keeping the pit in the avocado?
Doesn't really do anything. The only thing it does is it'll keep that area that it's touching the avocado from browning, but the rest of it is going to brown. So the area around it will help, but it'll help some, but it's very minimal. So cover a pot to make it boil. Don't use dull knives. Dull knives are just, you're going to have to exert more force. You're going to run the risk of cutting yourself worse. And a dull knife will give you a worse cut than a sharp knife. If anything, a sharp knife cutting you is kind of like having a paper cut. Sometimes you cut yourself, but you can't find it, which is much better than a jagged knife. Don't rinse or burn with super cold water. You always want to use like a lukewarm to a cool. The colder it is, you can actually, because of the rapid temperature change, you can actually damage your skin. So it needs to be cool, but not super cold. And you don't want to put ice on it. That will also do the same thing. Old wives' tales of saturating it with butter or something. No. Butter's going to trap in the heat, and you don't want to cover it right away. You want to let it sit, and you need some air to get to it. If it's a bad burn and your skin is gone, then obviously you want to wrap it with some light gauze, but you do not want to put a Band-Aid on top of it, which will hold the heat in, which I see a lot of people doing. Don't keep your leftovers longer than 6 days is my other big thing that a lot of people do. That's about the shelf life that you're going to get. After that, it's not. You could eat it, but you run the risk of making yourself a little sick. So I apologize for going over.
I'm just going to ask if there's any other questions.
Absolutely.
People are unmuted, so if people have questions, they can go ahead and ask. Maybe we're all set.
And if not, that's fine. I know I've gone over. I thank everybody for staying and hanging out. They did. It's been an absolute pleasure. And one of these days I'll get myself to talk less so we can get it all done.
But it's all great information. I mean, I learned so much. I'm taking notes and.
Oh, good. How do I wash peppers in terms of fresh peppers? I would just do really nice. Always wash any vegetable in cool water. You don't want to use hot water. Hot water will actually drive the dirt. It'll bring up the temperature, and if it mixes with the dirt, you run a greater risk of contaminating it. So always use cold water and right under the faucet, and I just really rub it vigorously. I personally, I don't use soap and water like they've told people to do. I don't feel like soap should be applied to a vegetable that I'm going to eat, no matter how much I'm going to rinse it. Just good old-fashioned cold water and scrub it with a little light brush if you need to, if it's really covered with dirt. Mushrooms are the only things I don't wash. I brush very carefully with a paper towel, only because they soak up so much water that they turn brown and they start to bruise. You can wash them if you're going to cook them, because they're going to be brown anyways. But if you want them to stay beautiful white, just use a really clean paper towel and wipe it off really well, and then you can cut it. And it's in dirt and it's cooked in dirt and essentially feces, but it's a commercial blend, and it's not like it's done in a way that it's not going to harm you, I guess is what I'm getting at. So it's okay to not wash them. I hope that helps.
Okay, and would a George Foreman grill work okay for grilling the veggies?
Absolutely, perfectly. What I happen to have is I have a beautiful cast iron grill pan that I use on top of my New Wave, and you can roast them. You don't even have to grill them if you don't want to. Should I use the oven? You absolutely can. Oh, should I use the oven? Is that what it said?
Cover.
You can. You absolutely can. I would toss them in that case. If I was going to use the oven, I would salt and pepper them ahead of time with a little drizzle of olive oil, and then I would roast them right in the oven. You can do them all on one pan, and when they come out, you can chop them and mix them all together. And yes, make sure you. That's all. Actually, I'm going to grab my pepper. I'll show you just the pepper finished, and then we can be done. So my pepper has been roasted. The skin is charred, and it's going to peel right off, and that way I can use it without the skin on it. I hate the skin on a cooked pepper. It's all set. I'm going to chop that up and add it, and then my garlic. Oh, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I don't know if you can really get a good look at it. It's nice and soft. It's a little bit brown. It's not crispy. And then this olive oil, as soon as it cools, is going to go right into my pasta salad. Phenomenal flavor. And that's it.
Thank you, Chef Kim.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And oops. Let's see. Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. And yeah, everyone, we have 2 other cooking classes this summer. If you want to go to our website and take a look at that, and our cookbook club.
Yes,
So that's it. Thank you. Oh, yes. And send me a picture of the finished pasta salad if you have a chance.
I will. I'm going to
I can.
as we speak. So, but thank you, everybody, for
Thank you.
being around. I appreciate it, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
We covered a lot.